back, everybody. We got some good things working on our tutorial, but there's some room for improvement. First of all, if I go flying off the screen, nothing really happens, just falls, and we don't even see what's going on. So we're going to add what's called Livebox. It might also be called a Livebox, and the idea here is it's going to be sort of a range that once the ball falls out of the range, it's going to trigger an event, which is going to allow us to find out when the game is over, which is going to be when it falls outside of the range of this. So it will stay alive while it's in the live box. We'll call it a live box, whatever. And so it's already a prefab in one of the previous tutorials. So we're going to use that prefab that's on that's already provided. It's the Livebox, Livebox, whatever you want to call it. We're going to drag it from the prefab under provided and drop it into our prefab folder. So that's in there. And it has a script with it. It's the controller for the Livebox. So we're going to take that and drag that into the scripts folder. So we have the Livebox, and we're going to go so far as, well, let's take a look at this prefab, the Livebox. And I'm going to click this little thing here, and it's going to expand it, and you're going to see that there is a camera attached to the Livebox. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to get rid of this camera. So we're just going to delete it. Bam, it's gone. Notice under the game window, we can't see anything because there's no camera at work. So we're going to take the Livebox, I'm going to drop it onto our main stage. It's attached to the player. I don't actually want to do that, so I'm just going to drag it up. There we go. And now we can suddenly see, we can actually see more. So the camera is actually showing us more of the screen. So one of the other things we're going to do, like I said, we have the Livebox controller script. So we want to make sure it's attached to the Livebox. It already is. Okay, so now we have this attached. So let's make sure we have this all set up. So give me just a moment. Okay, so I got my notes. I know what I want to say. One of the things here is the Livebox. I want to just zoom out so you can see this. You see the green box? That is the range of the Livebox, whatever. So as long as the sphere is inside of that, it should be fine. But one of the things you're going to notice is we have this controller that controls the Livebox, aka Livebox, and it has a y of -1. That means if we run it, one of the things I want to point out is you can see that it moves. And you see how this is moving as we go. Now I'm going to uncheck the maximize on play because I want you to see what's going on in the scene when I run it. And you can see the green circle is the one that's moving. So it's moving down. The camera is moving down with it as well. Okay, so eventually what's going to happen is the green of that is going to trigger with the player. And if we let it go too long, we're going to end the game that way. Before we do that, what we want to do is we want to make sure that our camera, our Livebox, will follow the player's X position. So if our player moves to the left or moves to the right, it's going to do the same, as it's also scrolling on its Y. So we're going to add a new script to the Livebox called follow. At this point, I don't believe there's a script. Nope. So we're going to actually create this script. So we're going to go back to the Livebox here. We're going to add a component, and we're going to go down to a new script. I'm going to click on there, and we're going to call it follow, capital F. Follow, like so. We're going to click create and add. All right, so now we have this follow script. So we're going to edit it. So I double click it so we can open it in Visual Studio. And let's go ahead and start working on this script. One of the things is we're going to go ahead and start adding some variables that we need. One, we need to know what game object we're going to follow. We're going to make this public. And so we're going to call it game. It's a game object is its type. We're going to call it toFollow. One of the interesting things here is that we can write a script that will allow us to follow other objects where you get to choose. By making it public, calling it toFollow, let's just go ahead and save our changes and let's go into our game in Unity and wait for it. Just click somewhere here, somewhere else, come back. Thought it would be in here by now. Click save. There it is. toFollow. Notice it says none right now. So we want to follow the player, so I just drag it over. That's one of the reasons why you would want to make it public. Now, what's cool is we can have it follow other objects as well. So I'm going to go back here, and we're going to add a couple more variables. We're going to basically, what we want to do is we're going to follow the camera. And so what we want to do is get an offset. And this offset is going to be allow us to track knowing that we have the camera is in a slightly different position from the player. And so we're going to take that into account, but we're going to make it private. It's a vector 3. So that allows us to store the location in the X, Y, and Z. I'm going to make that private, call it offset. And then we're going to have some public variables. And we're going to basically make it so that not in the script, but outside of the script, we can decide whether we want to follow the X, we want to follow the Y, or we want to follow the Z, or all of them. So we're going to, basically make this script something that will allow us to follow any one of those. So we're going to make these all public, and it's a bool, so it's true or false. And let's go ahead and create the first one. We're going to call it follow X, and we're going to set it to true. And let's save our changes. Remember, we made it public. So we want to click here, maybe click a different object, and then come back. It seems like there we go. All right, and notice one thing. There's follow X, and remember we set it to true. Notice how it's already checked. So let's do a follow Y and set it to false. And now let's see what happens when I save my changes and I come back here. I'm going to click on another object, go back to the Livebox. And notice I set it to false. It's not checked to begin with. So it's pretty cool. These public-private variables, if you make them public, you can basically have them show up here. Just thought I'd point that out as we go. All right, now we're going to go ahead and start clicking through this at a little faster rate. Before we look at the code, I think it'd be worth your while to going to the Unity documentation on this article, Understanding Vector Arithmetic, because we're going to be doing some addition and some subtraction of our vectors. So let me just define vectors and what's going on here. We have A, we're starting here and we're heading towards B, from A to B here. And this particular vector is we're saying add 3 to the X, so move over 3, add 5 to the Y, move up by 5, and then that's both the distance and the magnitude and the direction. So it's whatever we add to our current position. So when we look at positions, we're just looking at a 2D because we don't need to talk 3D at this point. If you can understand 2D, just understand it works on 3D as well, but we're just focusing on 2. So we have both. So vector, remember, we have from one position to another position, and then how much we're adding to it. So keep that in mind. There's addition, which is great for when we have two different forces acting on the same object at once. And then we have subtraction, which gives us direction. And we're going to get into this more in later tutorials, but I wanted to just introduce it. But let's look at the code. One of the things I did is I finished adding the follow Y, the follow Z. We set them all to true in here, but we can change it in Unity. So we can uncheck those boxes. On initialization, we want to get the offset, the distance between where we are, our transform, and its position from where we're trying to follow. So we need to know, basically, we subtract. And remember I said when you're doing subtraction, you're actually pointing in a direction. So we're pointing from position of the to follow to the transform. And so that becomes our offset. How, what's the offset? What's the distance and direction between these two locations? Then we change the update to late update. Late update happens after update has already occurred. So we basically we want to know which way the player is heading. So we already have its vector, its distance, and its direction. And once we obtain that, then we can decide if we're going to follow the X, the Y, and the Z. Okay, and that's part of the late updates. We want to calculate all other movement first. Then we're in late update, which will happen after update. So that's, yeah. So anyway, so we create this vector 3, which is a difference. And so what we have, remember we had the offset, the direction towards the one transform. And now we're going to add, basically, we want the position of what we're following plus the offset of this vector. And basically, that's going to give us this difference, okay, which will tell us like which direction we need to be heading. And it has 3 components, the x, the y, and the z. And the way to explain this is I just want to remind you that when we run this particular code, we are going to set follow x to true, but we're not going to do it for y or z. So this will have the effect of doing just from x, just basically we're only going to adjust if we're following x. We already know that's going to be set to true. Y and z will be set to false. We know we're going to do that, but this would work if all of them were set to true or none of them work. Okay, and what this is this funky little, you see a couple symbols here you may not have seen before in coding. This is called the ternary operator. And it's basically an if-else statement all lumped into one line of code. Not every programming language has this, but C# does, so we're going to use it. And it's a way of condensing it. What we're saying here is we're going to set an x and a y and a z. Each one is going to be a magnitude, so it becomes a vector in the x, a vector in the y, a vector in the z. We can separate them out. And if we are following x, in other words, we're saying if follow x is set to true. So if this is true, that's the question mark. So is follow x true? Question mark. Then if so, we set x to the difference of x. In other words, the direction we're wanting to head in to get to what we're following. If that is not set to true, else, this becomes the else, then we just set its x. We're going to set x to exactly the transform's position of x. So we don't, in other words, we don't change x at all. But if we change x, we're going to change it by the difference of x if we're following it. Same thing goes for y, same thing goes for z. In the end, whether we change x, y, or z, or it becomes the same as the transition, basically, at the very end, we're going to take our transform, we're going to move its position to the new vector, which is, in our case, it's going to be in the direction of the x and the y. And so then it becomes we're moving towards x. Okay, so that allows us to follow left and right with our player object. So let's go ahead and test this out in our game. We go back to Unity. I'm going to click away. We're going to click back on the Livebox. I did not save my changes, I don't think. So I'm going to save my changes. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to click on Livebox, click away, click on it again. There we go. It just now updated. There we go. So we're not going to follow Y. We're not going to follow Z. We are going to follow X. And you'll notice the follow script has the player here. So we're going to take a look, and we'll maximize on play. But what we want to see is in this bottom screen, when we start moving to the left, we want to see the camera moving to the left too. When we move to the right, camera moves to the right. All right, so there we go. Camera keeps going. You'll notice the ball moves too fast for us to keep up with the ball. But at this point, you could pretty much be confident that that ball has already gone below this box. So now what we want to do is we want to make it so that when we trigger this, that everything, basically we end the game. One of the things I noticed is the follow script is sitting outside of script, so I'm just going to drag it over into the scripts folder. Shouldn't affect anything about here. And now we're going to go to the scripts folder and let's get the player controller. We double click. We have this on trigger enter. We're going to do an on trigger exit. There it is. And we have a collider, we have an other, and we have this compare tag, pickup tag. So we're going to have to deal with tags as well. So we go over to the Livebox, and it turns out it already has a tag of Livebox. And if you didn't have one, you could always go and add it and then select it here. Okay, so make sure that the tag Livebox is there. We're going to go back here, and we need to add that tag now. So we're going to make it public, just like we did with the pickup tag. Call it the Livebox tag, because the other one was called pickup tag, and it was for the pickup prefab. This is the Livebox prefab, so we're going to call it the Livebox tag. And then we're going to go ahead and do this. So we're going to check if, and it's other.gameObject.compare tag. And then here, we're going to call this the Livebox tag. We're going to compare it to the Livebox tag. If that's the case, what we want to do now is we want to go get the game manager, which I'm not seeing here. So we're going to have to target the game manager. Okay, so no wonder I'm confused. Turns out I've been working 2 different classes, and I've been playing around with GitHub, and apparently I must have failed to include what we did here with the game manager. So I'm going to go back, add that code, and then go forward. You shouldn't have to do this if you've been following along. Okay, I got that in place. I'm just gonna. I like to just put my curly brackets in because you never know when you're gonna come back. It's always a pain to add them later. And so there is, according to GM, you have the game over, which I believe we have to call it as a method, and that should end the game. And let's just go ahead and save our changes and see if everything is working okay. We got to go to our player. One of the things you'll notice, we have to save our changes. Wait. Oh, no, it's there. Okay. The Livebox tag, I think it was just called Livebox, live_box. Okay. So add it there, and I need to grab the game manager. See, it doesn't have the game manager in there either. Okay, one moment. Okay, I added the game manager back. Sorry about that. I'll go ahead and test it out now. Let's see if everything's working. So score should be working. All right. And then let's go off of here. Game over. There we go. And notice it just restarts the game. Okay, so game over is working now. And so I'm going to go ahead and end this. Stay tuned for the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.